Awesome. I am joined by Mr. Mike Martin. Welcome to the podcast, Mike.
Hey, David, how are you?
I'm doing great. Mike Martin, Mr. MM. Anybody ever call you Mr. 2000?
I don't think so. You just
I can't
did.
be the first. Really? All
It's
right.
a new thing. I like
You
it.
gotta. I want you to use it, and you just credit me.
Always and forever. I love
Make it
it. It's
work.
great.
No, I'm really excited to have you here because this is stuff that we've talked about so many times when we've run into each other here or there, and I felt like at least somebody, maybe one person, would love to be a fly on the wall to hear what some of this stuff is we're talking about. So, what a better opportunity than to have you come on here and join me in my home office, in your home office, and talk about
Indeed.
this stuff. So yeah, obviously today where you wanted to delve a little bit into, and I love this because it's a bit of a departure, right? So much of what I do for work and the writing that I do and the people that I talk to, it's heavily tech, the latest tech, the newest tech. Um,
Always.
and yeah, that's great. But let's not forget about it's all about people, right? And so
Yeah.
I love when you and I talk, we always bring it back to talking about people. So we want to talk about what happens when we bring people together and how do we
Indeed.
do that? And timing can't be better. I just got back from 5 days in Denver
That's right.
with our teams, and boy, the feeling of just everybody being together in the same room or rooms and spending time with each other, both working very diligently on the task at hand as well as having some fun. You can't beat it. There's nothing
Pretty
like
tough
it.
to reproduce that.
It really is. So I mean, let's talk about now, sort of the elephant in the room, the pandemic. We don't want to talk about it anymore, but somewhat in our rear view mirror, we hope, at least, the bulk of it. So what's the path forward, right? In terms of people getting together, do you really think that, um, the momentum is there to start people coming back together and doing it maybe differently?
Yeah, I'm seeing that in my work now that people are definitely wanting to get back together again. And I look at it like I remember being in Barnes and Noble a while back and sitting in the chair and just the being able to pick the book up and hold it and all of that. And then all of a sudden, everything's going online to make all these sales. But the idea of that experience, that piece, I'm sitting there going, and this is a lot like what we're doing. Like we can't do everything online, at least in my opinion. And I'm thinking that, that we're seeing companies now understand that feeling that you're talking about and you described a minute ago, coming back from that SKO of just, there's something there. There was an energy, there was something around that. And I'm telling you, that's what I'm most interested in now, is looking at not just the technology, but how it all works together. And we can continue to keep that human part of learning and development, that human experience, and not go so far down the AI rabbit hole that it's just, that's the new sexy topic. But what about the times that we need to be together, and the times that we can connect and meet on a human level? I think that's where my head is right now as I start to really think about where we're headed in the industry.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. I mean, and it isn't, go back even a step back before AI, and it was all about VR and the metaverse. And, we've talked about
Yes.
VR since the 80s, but of course, last year, the metaverse and everything was going to occur there. And I was like, are you sure about that? I don't know if that's,
Yeah.
and almost as quickly as that peaked, it went away. And I think what you're describing is really the reason behind it. Obviously, VR has its practical applications. There's some really cool stuff going on there, but I don't believe in my lifetime that technology is going to recreate what it's like to share the same molecules in a space with other human beings.
Agreed. Yeah, I
And
think you hit it right on the head there. I think it's a perfect way of saying that, of just that there's just something that's missing, that energy, that feeling of being together. Now, trust me, I'm a techie. You know this. I absolutely love all the newest, latest, greatest gadgets and gizmos and all of that. I come from a tech background. I love all of that. I think there's a time and a place for it, though. I think that all of the learning technology that we're using right now can be used in a very appropriate way for appropriate things. But I feel like a lot of times we're trying to put everything into that bucket. Like everything can be done online or everything. And this isn't a new problem. But what I'm seeing now is that people are really starting to say, okay, what are the things we need to do when we're together? And how can we get the most out of that experience when we're there? I mean, I would be interested in since it's so timely, you were at your SKO. What was something that you felt that you got out of that experience that you couldn't have online?
I mean, honestly, the whole thing, because Even if this, so it's, for those shorthand, it's SKO, it was a sales kickoff. So,
Yeah.
but so you had sales and marketing teams together, and you've got a virtual organization where people do all work from their home office. And
Hmm.
it doesn't matter how many Zoom meetings they were on over the course of this past year, with various numbers of people within the group. You can't get what it's like to see people meet each other in person. They feel like they know each other,
Yeah.
but there's this next level of being in the room with each other, that you just. So if it was all solvable by virtual means, you wouldn't have seen that reaction. You wouldn't have felt that reaction when they were together, right? When they're like, "Oh my God, this is
Yeah.
so great," and everyone's. If all of the needs were being met through technology, people would not react that way. They'd just be like, "Oh, hi, here we go again," right? So I think that's
100%.
is a definite sign. And then just to me, the way that people were working together, doing things like role plays or helping solve problems, even though yes, you could sit on a call and do that, there's something about the way people interact, the mannerisms, the physical movements that people make when they're trying to either make an
Hmm.
argument or agree with you, whatever it is, it's totally different. And I really feel like, people thrive on it.
Yeah. I
Mm.
absolutely agree with you. And I think again, the idea here is not an either or, it's an and
Right.
both. It's like, how can we use the technology when it's most appropriate? And hopefully, we're speaking to the choir here with people who are watching this podcast of saying, yeah, okay, we know that it is important. I think that you can see that too when the businesses are willing to invest the money, the time, the energy, the effort into having things like your SKO or doing all these leadership development days where you bring people together and spend a lot of money, a lot of time on these types of things. I think where we get to is that next level of saying, all right, so if we're going to continue to do that, and I'm seeing that, and it's good, how do you squeeze the most juice out of that experience, right? Like, how do you make sure that when they're together, that it isn't just what I like to call the good luck with that effect? Have you ever, maybe you've seen that before, right? Where after an event that you've gone to, you're like, cool, man, good luck. And you high five and you're like, you got it? I got it. All right. And then we go back to our overflowing inboxes and our competing priorities and all the fires that are happening, and we forget about all that stuff that we were doing, or we have great intentions to apply it and actually practice it and get something out of that, but we're already on to the next thing, and it's very difficult to do that. That's where my head's at, is like, I'm saying, yes, we need to do these things, but how do we get the most out of that experience and make sure that what you're doing there is practiced and it becomes an application that drives results in the business.
Yeah, I mean, I can picture the look in leadership's eyes, even just this past week, as they're saying their heartfelt goodbyes, and people
Yeah.
walk out of the room, and you can see sort of behind their eyes, they're like, "Well, there it all goes."
Yeah.
Like all the stuff we just did. I hope it's just not walking out the door. Which I don't think that's the case, but exactly what you're talking about is that fear of okay, so now what, right? Good luck with that,
There's just
as you
not
said.
enough
No,
bandwidth, right? And and especially as me, I'm coming from the learning world, right? Like this is what I would do. I'd put on these events and I would go out and train folks and I would do these things. And this is what I do. I know that like even when I was working for Litmos, right, we would do these events. And then when we would come back, I'd be on to the next thing. And even for me, I'm like, okay, I have all great intentions to continue to allow people to practice, but and try to bring that stuff forward. But it's like, wow, it's just really, I don't know how you feel, but I'm pretty tired after these types of things. And I call it, I look at it like the baseboard effect in my house. Like if I've gone into my house and I've done all this remodel work and you get to the baseboards and I'm like, yeah, that's good enough. I don't need to, it's like, I
no one's
can
looking
live with
down
that.
there.
He's
No
like,
one's
but
looking
somebody
down
else
there.
would come in and go, man, we got to fix those baseboards. Like, but they're at a totally different energy level than I am. Does that make sense? I know it's a weird example, but I don't know. That's where my head's at.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense for sure. So I think what's going on now is, we're it's this evolution of, it's funny to talk about the evolution of in-person learning, which has,
Yeah,
been around since forever. And like you said, it's not
I
an
agree.
either or. I've never been a fan of the classroom is dead, or no, it has to be this, or, it's
Yeah,
clearly some combination of the two, and not a prescription that, it's always going to be this. It's whatever works in the moment. But I think when you watch orgs go from so much in person, right? That was just the catch all for everything, because that's just the way
sure.
you do it, to talking about how cool it would be if you could do technology based things, to then the pandemic forcing that technology to take over. And so you sort of saw this lift and shift, right? We're just going to, okay, now we're just in a matter of weeks, we're going to take everything we did in person and put it online. It reminds me of
Right.
like when film cameras were first invented and you had this opportunity to do some pretty amazing things. The first thing they did was film a play with a stationary camera. So you took the
Love
thing you
that.
were already doing and just use the new technology to replicate it.
Yeah.
But now we're here where we're sort of the seas have receded and it's okay. Yes, it is probably time to go back, but what does that look like? And I do notice I've seen like a lot of organizations have said, oh, good, finally we can go back to the way we were doing it,
Yeah.
which I don't think
Well, I
that's the
wouldn't go
right
all the way
answer
back.
either.
Yeah. I
Right.
mean, I mean, for the people watching, I think to get some real value out of this conversation. I mean, here's my thoughts on the matter on that. Is that hybrid approach, that whole mixed model where we're doing some stuff beforehand, we're bringing people together and doing something afterwards. Again, not a new thing, but I think that's where the main focus is. And here's what I've noticed, and maybe you have too, David. Is I see a lot of people that when they're thinking of these types of in-person trainings, when you're bringing people together, again, really focus in on that segment of when do we bring people together and why? And again, we're investing time, money, effort, all of that stuff in that. When you're bringing them together, what is it that they're going to get when they get there? And then the belief about it is the thing that I would like to change and challenge people to go with that. Is to say, you hear people say, "Oh, we have this offsite and it's March 13th and it's a 3-day thing." So it starts when they get off the plane or they get to the site, right? And it ends when they get back on the plane or when they leave the site. And I want to challenge people to say, hey, that's not the experience though, right? It's the couple of weeks beforehand that you could be setting up the learning for when they're in person so that they're much more prepared for the conversations that they're going to have. It's the time afterwards, after they've left, to really put it into practice, to really start figuring out and digging in and learning from each other. Like, well, that went well, or that didn't, or here's what happened when I tried X, Y, and Z. It's that whole process. It's not, we have a training in March. It's, we have the, and it's these days, it's, we're doing this experience where we're trying to really meet these outcomes. Does that make sense? I'm just, I want to challenge people out there who are watching this to think differently about it, that it's not a small portion of time. That is the greatest time, in my opinion, when you're bringing people together and you're really focusing in on the practical application of that stuff.
Yeah.
But what I find is that we bring people together and you're trying to teach them all that stuff when they're together, and then what happens? You just get to the point where you're ready to practice. It's like, okay, that's it. The training's over. We'll see you
Right.
again next time, right? And you don't have that time. So do stuff beforehand. Be already at that point when you show up so you can hit the ground in practical application, feedback loops, exploration, talking to each other, that type of stuff. And then follow up with that when you leave, not just
Yeah.
with accountability partners where you're like, oh, make sure you call David and David will call you. I mean, I love that idea. It just, I haven't seen it work real well. There needs to be something else that in my
Yeah.
mind, where people are really focused in, but I can see the time, the effort. Again, even for me when I was doing it, it's very difficult when you come back to be like, okay, we're going to keep this going. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just waxing and waning here.
But it's exactly the point. And these are things for people to think about when they're starting to put together programs that involve in person. You have to think about in terms like this. Like as you're talking about it, the way you're describing it, it makes me think of my kids and when they were real little. And I remember them going to kindergarten and thinking about the kids that were in that class. Right, you're coming together on day one of
Yeah,
kindergarten, and you've got kids that were in voluntary pre-K, so they've been going to a school for a year or two. Then you've got kids that were in daycare. So they maybe wasn't school-ish, but it was socializing. You're out there doing the things. Then you've got kids that haven't left home a day in their life.
sure.
And you bring them all into the room on day one, chaos, right? And so not that, the people we work with are toddlers. That's not what I'm trying to imply. I more mean if you're not doing some sort of upfront work, like you said, you're spending far too much, if not the majority, but in any definition, too much time getting people up and running, ramped up, connected, ready to go. And like you said, by the time you're ready to go, you're sort of on the backside of the in-person event, and then you're squeezing everything. And then, you said once it's over, people go on to the next thing. I would argue that it's not even the next thing. They're on to the thing that they weren't doing while they were there in person. They've already got the
True.
last things are
That's
piled up
fair.
before they can get to the next thing.
Yeah.
So keeping all of that stuff in mind, that as you're putting these things together, these are things that are on people's minds, things they have to worry about. So if we can get people to show up on day one and everybody's sort of like, I know exactly where I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to be doing, and what we're going to be talking about, and even what I should be coming away with, you can get started right out of the gate. It's my
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah, and it goes back to that story you told me about I know you're in a band and you were talking about the music. I loved that story. It really resonated with me when you were talking about how you all learn your parts before so that when you get together, you can just start practicing it rather than when you show up and it's like, okay, let's learn this and try
Yeah.
because you wouldn't have time, right, to do the thing that's the most important, which is let's run through it and let's give each other feedback and make sure we're there. I really
Yeah.
like that. And that's kind of, I think that really encapsulates what we're trying to talk about is how do you get to that point where they're reading the music before? So when you show up, that you're hitting the ground, actually doing the thing and practicing it. And then afterwards, we're following up with that.
Yeah. It's a distillation of like, you don't want to, it's a waste of people's time. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're having people do stuff in person that they could have done very well
Yep.
on their own elsewhere, it's a complete waste of time. You bring a bunch of people in, even if it's just, oh, I want to bring everybody together for this 2 hours, not even a trip or an overnight, just 2 hours.
Agreed.
And I'm going to talk at them for 2 hours. You don't need
Yeah.
to do that. You could have done that on a Zoom. You could have done it in an email.
Yeah.
So really valuing, why did I bring everyone together? How can I make the most out of this time in which people are occupying the same space? Because, when we were talking about the band thing, and I've been in that situation where you come
Yeah.
together, 4 or 5 of you, and you're like, okay, let's do this. And like, wait, we've got 1 or 2 people who still haven't figured out what they specifically are supposed to be doing, let alone how we're all supposed to do
Exactly.
it together. It's a drag. It's not helpful.
Just
Yeah.
orienting yourself to the problem or orientating yourself to whatever it is that you're doing takes so much time. Like, what if you did that beforehand? And then when they show up, it's more of like, okay, let's just do a quick level set, make sure that we're on the same page. Good, good, good. And now we can start jumping into it. That is such a more mature way of looking at it. But again, my personal belief here is that it's so built into us that a training is that period of time. That's it. So we need to learn everything, do everything, practice everything, and then it's good. Check the box and we're out, right? But
Yeah.
that's just not the way our brains work, right? We need that repetition. We need that drip. We need that, like how things are happening. We need to be able to actually practice whatever that is. And if it's not in our face all of the time, we need to figure out how to make it so it is, or a way to communicate with each other and talk about it and explore it more after the fact. It's just, I don't know, breaking out of that paradigm is very difficult. I don't know if you found that, but of that
It
idea.
certainly is. I mean, you and I have been around long enough to talking about this stuff to know that people do have these aspirations and these thoughts about how it should be,
Sure.
right? And we talk about this. This is what we're talking about, what we think, how it should be based on our experiences. And so when you start to talk to organizations and specifically about what they are doing or aren't doing, it's hard to not get in a space of like, oh, you're not doing this right. It's not that
Yeah.
they don't want to. It's not that people don't want to do these things
Again,
right.
great
It's
intention. Yep.
right. And they're not necessarily easy in a lot of cases. Now, the goal is you start to set it up, the first 1 or 2 times, it becomes easier and the payoff is much greater, right? That's
Sure.
what you're really after. So thinking of it in terms of those, we talk about how do we get people on the same page, do the lead up. And then obviously, I think for you, your big thing is that's important. The actual thing itself is important, but you're really invested in what's the after, I think.
Yeah, I
And I think
agree. Yeah.
it's the setup, the previous thing that's how you're going to set yourself up for success on the other end, right? So if you start the process, give people the tools, the space, how to do it before you have this in-person thing, that's going to set the environment for after, right? So it makes it a long continuous thing. Would you agree? Rather
I
than,
would agree.
okay, yeah, because I think it's like, here's what we do beforehand. I'm going to send out
Yeah.
these things and I'm going to have people click this thing, and then we do it. And now I want them to get into a place where they're going to talk about what we did in person in this way.
Yep.
And I think it's too disjointed, right?
Yeah, and what's interesting is that I can hear it screaming in my head, and I could probably hear it screaming in all the people who are watching this of like, I just don't have the time for that. But I think it's the most important thing to do is that when you start, with tight ends and loose means, you want the tight ends, not the loose ends, right? At the very beginning, you want to be able to be really clear about what you're trying to do the thing, and then clear about how you're going to make sure that it actually moves to an application type stage. But again, it comes down to an allocation of resources, right? My time, my energy of just like, man, I just don't have time to put all of that in, and we're just going to hit the baseline by having the event or holding the training. I don't know that
Yeah.
that does the service that we're really looking for. I know, and this could be just my own numbers, but I look back at the times that I was doing this in the corporate world, and before any type of training that I built, about 70% of my time and energy was spent with that, getting people together, setting up the schedules, all of that. About 25% was in the moment, right? I was doing the thing, and I left about 5% in the tank for the after, which is in my mind, is like, you learn this stuff now you got to go out and do it and talk about it and get better at it. But then there's just nothing left for that, which
Yeah.
again, I would challenge everybody watching this just to think through how you set things up and how that looks, and how you could possibly get a little more squeeze out of the juice, or juice out of
Yeah.
the squeeze. Sorry.
And so, and for folks who are listening who don't know Mike, I mean, Mike's done this, right? You've done this work, and this
Yeah.
is what you do and do well. So I wanted to maybe share some more thoughts about what does the after look like? What are some of the hallmarks of a good approach to after? Now, obviously, you don't have, like I said, it's not like you have a prescription and 5 bullets and do these 5 things, because every single thing
Right.
is different. But like just some key thought processes, considerations for what goes into how do I get the most out of, I took these 2 days and invested all this time and energy, lost
Yeah.
opportunity because people weren't doing their other job, whatever it is, take all that. How do I make sure I get the most mileage out of that? What are some of the things they should be thinking about?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it all comes down to giving people an opportunity to continue what they were doing with the people they were doing it with. So practice, feedback, exploration. The beauty of all this stuff is that you know it already. It's about, okay, how do we make sure that when they leave, that they're still having, one of the great ways is they're still having conversations with the people that they were building that relationship with. So if you and I, David, were at a training for the 3 days or whatnot, chances are we've talked to each other, we've done some things together, or whatever. How do we continue that on in a way that we can still tap into the tribal knowledge, or the all of those little things that you know and that I know, and we can keep exploring that. So I think continuing the community somehow, whether that's in a chat room in Slack or whatever it might be, that people can still, at least for a set amount of time, maybe not forever, but they can talk to each other. It's like, hey, after the fact, we're going to set this up, and this team that was in this experience together and was on you all went to Cabo together. You're going to stay in Cabo for a little bit, but virtually, and you're going to have a chance to continue that conversation. I mean, just little things like that, and allowing people that time. I think the whole drip idea, like when we look at learning theory and how people continue to process and really how learning sticks, is little by little every day. There's something that comes out that really reignites something from the training, or extends it, or gets them talking to each other about it, right? To me, that's just little things like that. It doesn't have to be more than 5 minutes a day, but a way for them to really continue that process out and make it a longer tail than just, it's over, good luck with that, and you're on your way. So drip content, building community, bringing people together. I think those are two really, really easy and appropriate ways of continuing that on, and just giving people the time, being like, hey, you know what? And talking about it differently. This goes back to the very beginning, David, when I was like, look, our belief has to be different about this. We don't say we have a 3-day training coming up. We're like, we have this experience, and it's going to be, X amount of time. It might be a couple of weeks on the front end where you're doing a little bit each week, one thing a week or whatever. And then on the back end, we've got a 2-week follow-up that's going to have things that are going to be dripped out to you or whatnot. And in my mind, if you set that up as the paradigm instead of like this 3-day, it also expands people's ability to say, oh, okay, this is a bigger thing than just the 3 days that I'm spending in this training, or the 2 hours that I'm spending in it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and not only can you use the beforehand, to give people the knowledge and information they need, but I mean, that's part of the process of getting people hyped up about the event itself, like get everybody
Yeah.
excited about it. I mean, you're probably doing that anyway. So like if you can fuse the two together, where it's, you're driving the momentum, but you're also providing tools and assets and information at the same time. I think that's key. And I think, like all those things you mentioned on the back end, so important. I think the ability to allow people to say, boy, that thing we talked about in, Vegas or wherever we were,
Yeah.
here's a time when that actually came into play for me. Let me share you with that. Like, showing, because I think that gets lost, right? You're all together,
So
and then
valuable.
everybody goes, and then each individual might have their own experience with what they learned and how they encounter that in real life. So to
Mm-hmm.
be able to bring that back and say, yeah, this thing's really, and then that'll clue other people who may maybe not want to offer up, right? If people don't want to contribute like right out of the gate, maybe. But
Yeah.
if other people are showing their experiences, oh, I have a similar experience, or it's funny, I had the exact opposite experience that you had with this particular thing. Anything like that, you have to be able to
Yeah.
allow those things to happen.
And you think about the value of that. Because now we're talking about that and we're getting more out of that experience just by saying that, oh, yeah, that really worked for me. It was like, that didn't work for me. All right, well, let's talk about that. Let's figure out why it worked for me and didn't for you, or whatever that
Mhm.
might be. And just extending that relationship that you build. Because you can have the exact same training, but the people who come up, it's like making a stew. You add different ingredients, you're going to get a completely different thing, like a soup, right? Or a stew.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what these train. It might be the same content, right? It might be the same, they come and it's the same structure, but the people are going to make it different, I guess is what I'm saying, right? And so it's going to be there. They've built that together. Let's just extend that out. Let's have it as our learning professionals to say, when I'm done with this training or whatever it might be, we bring them together and we've spent the money, the time, and the effort, which tells us that it's important, right? To me, that's the biggest. Anytime they're going to spend money on something or time on something, that's showing importance right there, right? Like, okay, that's important. So if it's important, then we should get the most out of it by saying, all right, when this part of it's done, we move into the next phase of connecting the people together and continuing to have them explore that whatever ideas those were, whether it's
Yeah.
presentation skills or sales skills or trust or difficult conversations or whatever it might be. There's a longer tail on that, and I think there's just a lot of things that get in the way. And I get that because I've been there, done that. I don't know. We just have to focus in and try to do better. I think not that we're doing
Sure.
bad. We could be better. I could be
Right.
better.
Well, and that's always a challenge, right? The competing priorities and how do I
Oh yeah.
decide what I'm going to do? And I think you sort of nailed it there. It's like, well, you've already decided that this thing, whatever it is important,
Yeah.
clearly, because you're going to
Yeah.
invest time and money, and that's what those are very scarce for everyone. So you've already
Yeah.
decided whatever this is important. Why not figure out how to get the most out of it? And maybe it requires a little more investment of time and money. Most likely, just a little bit more of time, because really the
Yep.
money is involved in the moment itself or the
Mm-hmm.
activity or whatever it is. But um, to make sure you're getting the most out of it,
Yeah.
I think that's key. So all right, so we talked a little bit about both ends, right? The previous and then the after. I think let's talk about the meat of the sandwich, I guess it is.
Yeah.
um, what about the in-person? I mean, we know what in-person training has looked like over the last, I don't know, 5, 10, 20, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
um, Going forward, how do we make sure that it's different? Because clearly it's inherently a good thing, right? It gets a bad rap just because it was used for everything and maybe not done well, but it was just that's the way we do it. um, what are some of the things to think about when you're thinking about the in-person element of itself? What are some of the things that should be considered, whether it's, and it could be anything like from a specific tool or just an approach?
I think the biggest focus is on making it relevant to the learners, making it relevant and experiential, meaning that they're doing things with whatever you're teaching them, that it isn't just PowerPoint on the screen and that you're walking them through some cerebral type things, that whatever it is, that it's bookended by whatever you're teaching is bookended by experience, that they might do something and then experience what you're about to teach them. And then they go, oh yeah, I saw that when we had this conversation. Teach them the right way or whatever it might be, whatever you need. And then on the back end, have that experience again to see what they do differently as a result of what they knew, right? Of what they were taught. So in my mind, it's like building in that experience in that and always be thinking that it's like, if I were in this, what would I want for this? What would how can I make this so it's really relevant? Like I can put it in a real world situation. Like I think that like team building and all of that type of stuff gets a bad rap sometimes because people are like, oh, it's that touchy feely stuff and blah, blah, blah. But what's interesting about those types of events that when we do those types of things is that we can pull the way that people play together is very similar to the way they work together. So when you can pull them together and have them do something where they go, oh man, I realized that I talk too much and that I step on people's toes when, okay, where else do you see that? And they go, oh yeah, I kind of do that. Now all of a sudden we're starting that experience that they've had. They come to that as a self-realization rather than being told, hey, you talk too much and you need to not step on people's toes, which people get, immediately the prefrontal cortex shuts down and amygdala hijack, all that stuff happens. You become defensive and you don't go anywhere. But using these types of experiences, whether, and it could be anything other than things that are just like, here's a process, right? You got to do X to, A to B to C to D to E. Then I think that's the stuff you can do beforehand or have them do virtually. They don't have to do that stuff there. Maybe practice whatever that thing is when they get there. It's like, show me that process now. What does that look like? And give each other feedback on that. Again, we're going back to that experience word, though. That's the biggest thing for me, that as an approach, I think if people think of that as like, what am I going to have them do as, and something behavioral, like when you're thinking about all of this stuff, these concepts, we need to be thinking about the behaviors that exist that they need to practice to do those concepts well. So just to unpack that for a quick second, if you want them to be better at X, right? What are the behaviors and the things that they need to be doing that you could see, observable things to be able to reach that, right? Those are the things that we want to be practicing in the moment and allowing time for that, because that's the best use of the time when you're together, right?
Mm.
Because I can see your eyes where we have the energy, and I can give you immediate feedback and be like, try this instead. Stand up taller, bring your shoulders back, be a little more when you're like, if it's a presentation thing, right? A little more forceful here. Great. That's the type of stuff that people learn because we model behavior. That's what we do as humans. Is one of the biggest ways that we learn is that we watch other people or we hear from other people. Model that. Let's make sure that we're doing that every time that we're together, and that we have a focus on that approach rather than here's a dump of content, right?
Right.
That's my take on it. Like, I look at conferences too, how many times I've sat in a conference room and it's delivered from the front and it's an hour long, and I'm like, okay. But then I
Yeah.
leave and I have a stack full of things and I'm excited and I've got all these concepts, and then I have the same stack in the same place next year when I go back to the show. It's like, how do I make that more experiential so that they go try this and then tell us what you think? Right.
Yeah.
Or I don't know. That's something I've always struggled with, even being a presenter in a lot of these conferences. I've done, just as I've done a lot of those in my life. And I just feel like sometimes I walk out being like, good luck with that. I mean, I hope it works. And it's hard for me, I guess.
It is. So you bring up something really, really important. So that's most folks probably listening and that we know have some sort of conference experience. They've been as
Sure.
an attendee, they've spoken, maybe they've ran one, whatever it is, right? But it's a generally universally applied experience. The challenge becomes when companies start to think about what they want to do with this sort of, okay, I'm going to have this in-person centerpiece to this program. They go, well, what have I seen in the past? What do I see? And they start to use conferences as a model. And
Yeah,
it's a terrible model for this. And
that's
no
true.
offense to all my conference friends who I will see several times later this year
That's
at
right.
all the things that I'm speaking at. It's a terrible model for an individual organization because it's about scale. Conferences are about scale. How do we hit as many people, as many ways as we possibly can, give everybody something that they might be interested in?
Yep.
And it's so the more you scale something, the more generic it becomes, or the less interactive it becomes just by definition. So when you're thinking about your own program, scale is something to consider. What kind of a scale am I trying to do this on? And is
Yep.
the scale so great that I'm not going to be able to do any of the things that I'm thinking about? So maybe you need to rethink what you're doing.
Yeah,
But also, and I want to get your take on this. I think about it like,
for sure.
okay, in person, you might have a wide variety of generations in your audience, right? You could
Uh-huh.
have 2, 3, maybe even 4 different generations that you're working with. And look, I'm not necessarily like a big all the generations are different and very discrete and everything they want is different from the other. I don't think that's true. I think there are some really interesting differences. I think this is one area where you might run into younger generations who think some of this in-person stuff, the way it's been done, it's corny
Hmm.
and I don't want to buy in. And in fact, your attempts to engage them have the exact opposite effect. And they're like, ugh, nobody gets it. And so, so what do you think about that? Is that a real thing? Because I feel like when you think about the traditional classroom, we just sort of default to that because, well, everybody knows what that is, right? You're not going to miss anything by doing it that way. And everybody can
Yeah.
sort of relate to what that is. But as you start to try to do it differently and get more experimental, more experiential, as you're saying with it, how do you manage that sort of intake from the different generations?
I think you have to make that relevance case, that what's in it for me up front with that kind of in that situation. That's got to be the first thing that you do, is you have to get the buy-in from the group to say, all right, I'll give you a little bit of leash here, right? I'll let you run a little bit before I may pass judgment on whether this is going to be good, bad, or neutral, right? And I think that's where you really hit it up front about the about that really that focus on this is relatable to you, this is why, giving that why. Like, to me, just spending those extra few minutes to really make the case and get folks to understand the why behind what you're doing. I see that that's something that gets missed a lot, where it's just like, I'm going to do this to you, rather than here's the reasoning behind it. Like, I think I've told you this story before, but I remember I was getting my truck, I had a chipped windshield, and I was getting it repaired. And the person on the phone said, okay, bring your truck in with a full tank of gas and we'll get it repaired and everything's great. And we hung up the phone, and immediately my brain started making stuff up, right? Like, why would I need to have a full tank of gas? I don't understand that,
Where are
right?
they
I'm like,
going?
are you gonna Ferris Bueller my truck and go out? And and then I got all defensive. Like, I'm not going to do that. I don't care about that, whatever. And then I took it in, and the person there said, hey, did you bring it in with a full tank of gas? And I said, oh, it's about 3/4 tank. Like, okay, that's great, because what happens is that it helps even out the truck when you're putting on, the way the tank sits in this particular model, it helps even out the truck. So when we put that on, it's less likely to crack the seals and stuff. And I went, why didn't you just say that on the phone, right? Like, just spend that extra 30 seconds to say the why part, to be like, this is why I'm asking you to do that. And I went, I would have brought it in with lots of gas. I would have, oh yeah, that totally makes sense to me. I get it. I like, yeah, no problem. I got you.
You
Right.
know why that
But
example's so good? That example's
I,
so good because not only is it just, hey, give me the why, but like the why is super interesting.
yeah,
And it also demonstrates to me that, oh, you guys really do know what you're doing.
exactly. Yeah. A
Like,
competence level, right? It's like, we know that this has happened and we want to prepare you for that. Unfortunately, the first person I talked to just missed it. And there was just that little bit of context. If that was set, I would have changed my belief about it entirely. And then the result would have been different. And they fixed it fine, and it was great. So end of story
okay.
if you're interested. But the whole point of that is I started thinking that from a learning perspective. And I'm like, how often do we miss that chance just to spend that extra 30 seconds to be like, this is why you're doing this. And just keep bringing it back to the what's in it for you. Right. Let's keep bringing it back into that. And the focus on that is so important up front, that you can capture anybody's attention that way when they go, okay, I see it. And once you have that, then you have what you need to be able to have them really step into the potential that they have, rather than trying to pull them through it and do it to them. I think, to
Well,
me, that's my biggest upfront approach, or my gift to whoever's watching, if just through my experience of something you can implement pretty quickly, is just think through, like, what questions would you ask as to why you're doing this stuff, and answer those before.
oh yeah.
Preemptive
Listen,
strike.
I'm a huge fan of what's in it for me. I talk about it a lot. I'm trying to remove
Yeah.
the stigma of the question because it sounds so arrogant and rude when you ask it. But
Yeah.
the point of it is, yeah, maybe people aren't specifically asking that, but by definition, people are asking themselves that question in everything they do,
Yeah.
consciously or subconsciously. They are asking themselves that question. And if you can provide somebody the what's in it for me and make it make sense, they'll follow you almost anywhere
It's
as long
true.
as you've provided that. And yeah, you're so right. It gets missed. People think engagement. It's like, well, we better have some fun games at the in person, and the video better be good, and we'd be able to click. Those things are all great. But if they
Yeah.
walked in the door having no idea why they're there or why it's important or who
Yeah. I was
cares,
told to be here.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're fighting uphill. It reminds me of the Barbie movie, No Judgment, when Ken picks up his guitar and says, "Can I play my guitar at you?" And it's like, at you? That's exactly it. I'm going to play my
It's
guitar at you,
true.
not for you, not with you. I'm going to play at you.
It's such a subtle change, but those words mean everything in the context and the belief that I have about what's about to happen, right?
Oh yeah.
And I think too, one other note that you made me think about is that it's not just about the content, right? What's in it for me, that what I'm teaching you is important, but who's doing it, right? Like, I remember I worked with a group that of at-risk students once, and they're looking at me and going, "What does this guy have to teach?" Like, and what I did is I took $100 bill and I put it on the ground. And I said, "Hey, anybody that can jump over this $100 bill can have it." And that was the first thing I said. I introduced myself, nothing, just like $100 bill. Who can try it? Oh, but you have to be holding your toes on the front like this when you do it. And then, I had people, person after person after person, try. And at the end, One got close, but I've never seen it done. I picked up my 100 and I'm like, oh, nice try. I'm like, it was pretty good. But then I had them right from the beginning. They're like, okay, this guy might have something, like, I'll listen to him a little bit longer. And it was just this amazing experience of just being able to pull it together. Like, I do have some interesting things for you and interesting ways to think and stuff you might not be able to do. Right. Like,
Right.
to me, that's that. Again, going back to the point of that, it was that it's not just about the content, what's in it for me, but it's about the person of like, does that person really have something to teach me? Can they capture my attention out of the gates too? That doesn't mean you have to be all gregarious and, extroverted or whatnot. Just means you have to be able to, like, here's the deal. It's like, I'm here. This is what's going to happen, and these are my credentials in a way without being like, oh, I went to Harvard. And then, you know what I mean? But just them being able to see that it's like, okay, this is a good use of my time on multiple levels. I think that's another important thing to think about.
Well, as soon as the camera is off here, I'm going to practice holding my toes and jumping for the next time I run.
So hold them
you.
on the front. So put your fingers around and then put your thumbs on the top. They have to be on your toes. And then without letting go, you got to try to jump over a bill lengthwise, not widthwise. Come on.
Give me a week. I'll get there.
I want to hear. See, this is a great example, right? We taught it. Now I'm going to follow up with you in a week, and we're going to watch your form. We're going to see
and
how
what's in it for me is $100. So
it's your own 100, though. So I guess it's not a very.
So look, this is awesome, and I think there's so much more we could talk about, but it's when we were talking privately amongst ourselves before, I just always thought this is such a topic that doesn't get talked about enough. That everyone's so hyper focused on technology and the next greatest thing. It's like, well, what does that mean in terms of in-person people? So I appreciate you sharing your thoughts and your experience, which obviously you have plenty of. But we've reached the point in here where I do it's prediction time.
Yeah,
and what I like to do. Yes, what I like to do with my guests is we can look at someone else's crystal ball, meaning we could look and see a prediction that was made that should have come true already. And we could talk about whether or not it has, why or why not.
Like flying cars? Is that kind of,
right?
No, something different. Okay.
Yeah, that's because, well, we can get into why that won't work for right now.
But should have come. Jetsons told me we'd have them by now. So
right. Well, we have the talking phones. What about all right, so the next one is a prediction that has been made, but wouldn't have come true yet. So we can decide whether or not we think it will or not and why. Third option, you can make your very own prediction and we can talk about why you're making that prediction.
I'd like to make my own prediction if that's okay.
I knew that you would.
But I think it's probably connected to lots of other people's predictions too. So again, I'm not new. I'm just, for me, I'm something that's been occupying, space in my brain rent free, as the kids say. And that prediction, I think, is that like in the learning space, I really think that AI is going to play a huge point. But in this regard, for anything that is like a how-to or has a very direct, definitive answer to it, I think that AI is going to really help out on that level with the jobs like for instructional designers and people like me building content and delivering content. It's going to be such an amazing bonus and a positive thing for us. Because I think most people, I remember a year ago talking at the Brandon Hall conference about AI and everybody being scared of it. I look at it as a positive thing. I look at it and say, hey, if it can do some of this grunt work for me and answer these types of questions automatically without me having to build out a course for it and then keep that course up to date or whatever it might be, I'm all for that, because it opens me up to the stuff we've been talking about over the last 30 minutes, to be able to be more human with those, like more time to call folks and be like, how's it going? What are you doing? Like more time to get together as groups and even on Zoom or whatnot and have sessions where we're talking about stuff and exploring things. It frees up the time and the bandwidth, I think. I think that AI is going to do a lot of stuff like that. So anything that has a definitive answer, has a process, something like that, I think you're just going to be able to ask the bot. Be like, hey, how do I set up a team structure in my LMS? Right. And it's like, oh, here's how you do that. First, you're going to want to start with this, this, and this, and da, 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 da. It's like, you want me to do it for you? It's like, sure. Like, I feel like that's where we're going to get to. And I don't see that as a threat. I see that as a blue ocean, right? Or as part of the blue ocean. I see that as a bonus to be like, great. Now we don't have to think about that stuff. Because when I was working at Litmus, that was part of my job, was to build out all of the training for all of our customers to learn how to use the product, right? So we had all these different trainings around how to build a team and structure, or how to set up a course or whatever it might be. I think a lot of that stuff could be easily done, through AI to be like, oh, in the moment when they're just like, this is what I need. And then it tells them or helps them do it,
Yeah.
which leaves us folks being able to do bigger, greater things. That's my prediction.
Well, all right. So first thing I have to do is I have to mark off my podcast punch card. You mentioned AI, so I have not gone a single podcast without talking about AI yet. I appreciate you
And
saying
there
it
it
at the
is.
last
Yeah.
minute there. And we
You're
almost
welcome.
we almost made it, but there we go. Thank you.
Oh man, I
Uh,
let you down, David. I'll try better next
no,
time.
you didn't. You did exactly what I was hoping you would. But I agree to a level. I think that's obviously going to play some role, right? And I just wonder sometimes, like the idea that it's going to allow us to be more strategic. That's the goal. And I love your sort of take on it, which is such a Mike Martin take, is that the robots are going to help us be more human, right?
Yeah.
It's going to let
Yeah.
us focus on the human element of things. But if
I
I look
hope.
back what's that?
I said I hope. I mean,
Well, yeah,
that's
we
my
want,
hope.
yeah,
That's
of
my
course. But you look back at like sort of the history of technology, and every single technology that's ever come out, from a toaster oven to whatever, is it's going to save you so much time. It's going to
that's
save you
true.
time. And if we added up all the time that was supposed to have been saved by technology, what do we do with it? Where'd it go?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't have it. Do you have it? I don't have it.
I do not have a trunk of it. I wish I did.
So yeah, so I'm hoping, yes, it allows for that.
Yeah.
We sort of end up finding ways to find other rote procedural mundane tasks to take the place of the ones that we're not doing. But yeah, I think that's going to take it. It isn't that the AI and it really, honestly, I think when most people talk AI, all they're really looking for is automation, like you described. Like, how do I get
Correct.
something to happen without me having to do it? I think, but it's
Yeah.
going to take a conscious effort of people to then say, okay, I need these things to happen automatically, AI
Agreed.
empowered or whatever, so I can do these specific strategic things. I think a lot of folks are in the spot that they think the AI is going to like sort of show them the strategic things that they could do or the different places they could go. And it's like we have to take a very human conscious approach to it, I think. But
Yeah. No, I
I
agree with you.
love
And
the way you
maybe mine
think.
was more of an aspiration, right? Like rather than a prediction, is that because you are right. Like if you look over time and you look at what's happened historically, it was a great example with like microwaves and such. It's what we do with that time that it frees up,
Yeah.
and to me, that's the hope is that that will happen, and then what you do with it is really the biggest piece. And I hope listeners who've watched this all the way through, congratulations by the way, are gonna start thinking through that. Like if I do have that extra time and I can use technology where it's appropriate, how can I better utilize the time that I'm with another human being in a room, or I'm in even on Zoom, right? Even seeing you here, this is better than just texting or typing or I'm sorry, or calling on the phone. So like
Yeah.
how can we use the different technologies all together? I'm not saying either or get rid of I'm just saying, yeah, how do we do that and make more of the time that when we do get to be together and high five for real,
Yeah. I love where
be
this has
human.
brought us to in this podcast episode and how to wrap up, because it's a great illumination of the two of us. I think it's showing me as the cynic and you as the optimist. You are definitely an
Try.
aspirational person, Mike. That's why I like talking to you. You make me think things are possible. So I appreciate that very much.
Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it. This has been a blast. Always great to talk to you, and I hope that your listeners get something out of the time that we've been John. So it's good.
Somebody always finds something, so I'm glad. I think in the two of us talking, I think there's definitely some good nuggets in there. Just get people thinking. That's all we're trying to do. Just give it another thought. Think a little bit more about it, and that's all we're doing. And I think you've provided a lot of opportunity to do that. So I really appreciate you joining me. I just
Thank you,
look forward
sir.
to running into you around the world
Indeed.
later on this year somewhere, which we will. But yeah, thanks again, man. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate it.